Hi everyone. With the price of food and the rate of inflation at the moment, I've been meaning to do this video for a little while, and it's all about growing free food. Now there are so many different ways you can grow free food. I will probably only tell you a few of them, and if you've got other ways that you personally use or that you know about, please share so that we can all benefit. But I'm going to take you through a few of the ways that I grow free food, and some of them are because I'm in my sort of third season, and some of them you can do from scratch. So we'll start off with some things that you can do from scratch. So things like a piece of ginger, a piece of turmeric. If you've got an extra piece that you don't need, or perhaps one that's starting to look a little bit, like, oh, I'm not really sure I want to put that in my cooking, stick it in the ground. They grow. It's seriously amazing. And I'm going to show you some turmeric that we did exactly that with very shortly. So we'll have a look and see what sort of harvest we've got from that. The other thing that you can get is things that you buy in the supermarket, especially root vegetables. So things like carrots, Swedes, turnips, beetroots, those kind of things. When you cut off the little top and you throw it away, instead of throwing it away, pop that into a shallow saucer, put some water, and you'll notice that the green leaves actually start to grow back. Now, all of those green leaves from swede, turnip, beetroot, carrot are edible. And especially when they're small and young, they're really sweet and delicious to put into salads. And as they get a little bit bigger and older, you can pop them into your stir fries, curries, soups, casseroles, etc., etc. And they're also great for making things like pesto. So you might have a little bit of basil, but because it's expensive, you're not going to buy 3 or 4 bunches, you might buy one, and then you can actually flesh it out with a little bit of these leaves and some rocket, things like that, and they taste absolutely amazing. So that is a way of growing some free food just on your windowsill. You don't even need a garden for it. It's incredible. And another way that we have is, if you saw my sweet potato harvest video, the little bits and pieces that you have left over that are not edible, then just pop those back in the ground. And it's the same with potatoes. And if you've got some sprouting in your pantry, you might have potatoes sprouting in your pantry or sweet potatoes sprouting. The leaves of the sweet potato are absolutely edible, but potato leaves are not edible. But just pop them in the ground and see what happens. What have you got to lose? Now with potatoes and sweet potatoes, they can kind of take over. So maybe put them in a part of your garden or in a pot where you don't mind them kind of going a little bit crazy, because that's what they tend to do. So this is probably the one that most of you are interested in, with the shocking price of lettuce these days. How do you grow free lettuce? Well, probably to start with, it's not going to be completely free, but I recommend that you get yourself a packet of seeds and grow some, because all of my lettuce now is free because I just allow 1 or 2 plants to go to seed at the end of the season. And the seeds that they broadcast around the garden just pop up. I end up pulling them up almost like weeds. But it's fantastic because I can just go around and pick my salad whenever I want to, and it keeps on coming. So if you don't have a big garden or you don't want to put lettuce in your garden, a pot around this size will easily fit you 4 full-size lettuce comfortably. So what will happen is they'll each sort of grow out in their own way and come over the sides of the pot. Now I do recommend that if you're growing your own lettuce, that you grow what's called the loose leaf lettuce varieties or the non-hearting lettuce leaf. So iceberg lettuce is an example of a hearting lettuce because it becomes that big ball, and obviously it's really difficult to tear off one leaf at a time. But if you've got something like the ones that I'm going to show you, you can literally just peel off the outside leaves and it will keep growing. And honestly, once they get going, they keep going for months. And the cool season that we're in now in Melbourne is the time for lettuce. They don't like the heat, so now is the perfect time to be planting your lettuce seeds. What I've got here is a variety called Amish deer tongue, and this one is a really favourite of mine. It's called that because it sort of looks like the shape of a deer tongue, but the reason I love it is because you can just pick off all the outside leaves and you just go from plant to plant. I've got them growing all over the garden because I let some seed last year, and you take whatever you want and then come back in a few days' time and they've just grown back. But the other lovely thing about this is you can actually use it like spinach as well. So not only can you use it like a lettuce leaf in your salad, but you can use it in cooked dishes like spinach. So it's really, really versatile. And if you can find it, there is a red variety of this as well. So that's called Amish deer tongue. but any of the loose leaf or non-hearting varieties of lettuce you can do this with. You literally just keep picking them all season long instead of having to sacrifice that one plant and wait for it to grow to full size before you can even get a harvest from it. So that is my favourite way of harvesting lettuce. And this is another variety of lettuce that is providing us with free food. This is again one that has self-seeded from last year and is just popping up all over the garden close to where it was growing last year. And in this bed we've also got some potatoes popping up, and they were just ones that I missed harvesting last year, so we'll get another free harvest of potatoes from those. Another leafy green that's great to have in your salads is these nasturtiums, and nasturtiums are completely edible. You want to be using the smaller leaves in your salad because they are quite peppery and have a sort of a wasabi flavour, but having all the variety of greens in your salads actually raises it up to another level of deliciousness. And these are so abundant in my garden. I'm literally pulling up plants by the hundreds because they just self-seed every single year. But we'll talk about those a little bit more in another video because I really want to do one on all the different edible greens that we have in the garden, because there's lots of them that probably you've got in your garden that might be a surprise. But a disclaimer on that, don't go running out into your garden and start eating everything that's green because some of them may not be edible. So in this bed here, I'm hoping to get some more free food. And recently I did harvest the sweet potato, which was free food because it was just from scraps that I grew from the pantry. And this is also another scrap from the pantry, and this is turmeric. So I bought a fair bit of turmeric, had a few bits left over, popped a couple in the garden, and this is one of them. I do have another smaller one, but I'm going to leave that and harvest it next year. So we'll just have a little fossick underneath and see what's in here. Let me just have a little look, see whether we've got anything that we can eat in here. Oh yeah, there's something down here. There's probably around about 300 grams there. I will wash it and weigh it later, but that has literally been grown for free because this was grown from a little scrap I just popped in from my pantry. So that's another way that you can grow free food, and you can do this with ginger as well as the turmeric or galangal, and any of those can be grown the same way. Probably wait now till the spring to pop them in, early spring, and they will grow for you next summer. And some more free food that we have growing in the garden is actually at my feet. It's cabbage that I've already harvested last year. So we grew our cabbage, we harvested our cabbage, beautiful big cabbage heads, and then instead of pulling the roots out of the ground, I just chopped the cabbage off and left the roots in the ground. And Theo's just going to pan down and show you what we have left, which is perfectly edible. So here we've got one that's actually trying to form another cabbage head. But what I do in the meantime is I just come along and pick off these leaves, and they actually taste like cabbage, and that is still feeding us in the garden, you know, nearly a year later. And then just across over here is another free item of food, and that is some fennel. And again, that has come from self-seeding. And we have all sorts of things that have self-seeded in the garden, and it's just wonderful because I never really quite know what it is. And the cool thing, the challenge is to identify what's that growing and can I eat it? But after a season or two, you get very used to that and you do get to be able to identify them. In this raised bed behind me, we've got a little bit more free food. The first one here is carrots. And the reason these are free is because I grew some carrots in this bed last year, allowed one or two to go to seed, and they've just come up. So I saved the seed, I harvested the seed and saved it to put in other areas of the garden, but obviously before I got to it, some had sprinkled themselves here, and there's loads of them coming up in this bed. So I'm really happy about that. And then just behind that, we've got another free item of food, and that's called warrigal greens. Now, if you're not familiar with this plant, it's also called New Zealand spinach. And this was one of the very first plants that Captain Cook found when he arrived at Botany Bay. And it actually helped to cure his ship crew of scurvy, so very high in vitamin C. But it is very similar to spinach, so you can use it just like you'd use your spinach. It does have oxalates in, just like spinach does, so you're not going to eat, you know, bucket loads of it raw, but certainly put some of the young leaves into your salads raw. They're delicious. What I found is that once you have got one growing, they just appear all over the garden. So I had a plant growing in a completely different area, and I didn't sow these seeds. These have been carried by the birds or the wind, and now they're popping up all over the garden, and I've got more free food, which I absolutely love. So these are some classic free food items. They're spring onions. Now you might buy spring onions from the supermarket that are in a bunch with their roots still on them. Then once you've chopped off the tops, just leave a little bit at the bottom, separate them out into single plants and pop them into a pot or into the ground. Now these were actually even more free than that, because my neighbours, my lovely neighbours who help contribute towards our compost by throwing their veggie scraps over the fence, they actually threw over a bunch of spring onions that still had the roots on, and I looked at them in the compost and I thought, I'm just going to experiment with those. So they were chopped down to about here, and I've popped them in and they're all growing back. So another classic free food item. So when you get your ones with roots on, pop them into the ground, pop them into a pot, and you will have spring onions that will just keep growing. And just don't cut the whole thing off, just cut off, you know, the green bits, a few green bits at a time. I've done one here, and then they'll just keep growing for you and you'll have them for months. So here at my feet, underneath one of our grapevines, I've got another example of what will be free food for us. Initially, I paid for a packet of seed for these artichokes, and the first year we had 3 artichoke plants growing. Last year that doubled to 6 artichoke plants growing, and now I counted and there's actually 10 plants in this clump here. Now once they're fully mature, they actually grow around about 16 artichokes per plant. So with 10 plants, if they go full out, that's 160 artichokes just grown from probably, you know, a $3 packet of seed, which is pretty amazing. And just behind me, another example is that we've got some pots and some grow bags which have got potatoes in, and they are again cast-offs. Some of them are just ones from the pantry, some of them are ones that I grew last year and I just kept a couple. They've gone into the grow bags, they're already sprouting, so that's going to give us another harvest this year. So there's so many different ways that you can grow food for free. Another way to get free food is through cuttings. And this plant I've got here is called a Pepino plant, and it's a South American fruit. And once it gets going, it pretty much fruits all year round. It doesn't have fruit on at the moment, but it has got the flowers. This is a cutting that I took from a plant that we've got in another part of the garden, which has been very, very prolific, and it produces egg-sized fruits. Some of them up to about 400 to 600 grams, and they're really pretty. Once they ripen, they actually are sort of a yellow colour with purple stripes on them, so they're very attractive when they're hanging on the plant, and they taste a little bit like melon, so a little bit like you cross between your honeydew and your cantaloupe melon, and we really, really enjoy them. So again, free food from just taking a cutting from another plant. Another example of plants multiplying to give you free food is strawberries, and they are amazing, particularly if you can be disciplined enough to not take a harvest the first year. What they do is they put their energy production into what's called runners, and each of these runners will produce another strawberry plant for you. And we've actually got quite a few of them that we've already kind of pegged into pots to get them started, but these ones I can pop into the ground, and then once they've got their roots formed, I can separate them from the mother plant, and that will form a whole new plant. So in summary, how do you get free food? Well, there's lots of different ways of doing it. If you're growing things at the moment, let a couple of them go to seed, let them scatter their seeds all around your garden, and you will have plants coming up forever. Probably not even have to plant that plant again to get those things growing. When you go to the supermarket, things like your carrots, your swedes, your turnips, your beetroots, instead of throwing the tops away, pop them into saucers, grow the leaves, eat the leaves. They're delicious, they're nutritious, and they really do elevate your salads and other dishes. They're amazing. Also from the supermarket, things like your peppers, your chilies, even tomatoes, things like that, pumpkins, you can use the seeds. They are free seeds, my friend. Don't throw them away. They will come up in your garden. So, you know, think about planting them rather than just chucking them in the bin. And other ways that you can do it, grow plants that naturally multiply, like the strawberries, like the artichokes. Things like asparagus is another example that just keeps multiplying. The other thing that you can do is take cuttings from plants that you already have. So our pepino is an example of that, and we do that with lots of plants in our garden. And grow things that are going to be cut and come again, like the lettuce varieties that you can just take the leaves from the outside, because that way you can harvest them all season long rather than just getting one lettuce and then that's it, they're done. Things like your cabbage, if you do happen to grow things like that in the garden, when you take your cabbage, don't take the roots, let it regrow its leaves. They taste exactly like the cabbage that you harvested the year before, and they're absolutely delicious and they're free. Potatoes, your turmeric, your ginger, your galangal, your sweet potatoes, if you've got any of those sprouting in the pantry, chuck them in the ground. They want to grow. Life wants to live. So there's so many ways of getting free food. We've just really touched on a few of them here. I'd love you to share some more ideas. But from Lou and Theo in this patch of earth, it's over and out from now. And I hope that this is going to help you save lots and lots of money. Bye for now.